In the summer of 1976, the world came terrifyingly close to World War III. Over a tree. Yes, not missiles, not spies, not even nuclear weapons. A tree. It's a story so absurd it sounds like a parody, but it actually happened. And it's remembered today as the Cold War's strangest standoff. The axe murder incident and Operation Paul Bunyan. To understand this madness, you need to know about the Korean Demilitarized Zone, or DMZ. It's supposed to be a buffer, but in reality it's the most dangerous border in the world. North Korean and South Korean troops face each other every single day, often just meters apart. Now imagine all of that Cold War tension, bottled into a 4-kilometer wide strip of land where anything, literally anything, could spark a global disaster. In the middle of this powder keg stood a huge poplar tree. It sounds silly, but the tree blocked the Americans' line of sight between two checkpoints. And for soldiers in the DMZ, not being able to see the other side, that was a matter of life and death. On August 18, 1976, a small crew of U.S. Army officers and South Korean soldiers arrived to trim that tree. They carried axes, tools, and expected just another routine day. But North Korea had other plans. Within minutes, more than 30 North Korean soldiers swarmed in. They accused the Americans of trespassing, demanded they stop, and then suddenly, violence erupted. The outnumbered U.S. soldiers fought desperately, but the North Koreans seized their axes and turned them into weapons. Captain Arthur Boniface and First Lieutenant Mark Barrett, two U.S. officers, were brutally beaten to death. The rest of the team barely escaped. It was a massacre right in the middle of the DMZ, in broad daylight. And the world was horrified. The incident became known as the Axe Murder Incident. But the real danger wasn't the blood on the ground. It was the question hanging in the air: how would the United States respond? In Washington, President Gerald Ford and his cabinet were briefed. The Cold War was already at boiling point, and now 2 American officers had been killed in one of the most sensitive flashpoints on Earth. Many feared an immediate war, but instead of launching an airstrike, the U.S. decided to do something even more theatrical. They would send a message so absurd, so over the top, that North Korea would never forget it. This plan was called Operation Paul Bunyan, and yes, they named it after the legendary American lumberjack, because this whole thing was about chopping down a tree. 3 days later, on August 21st, the Americans came back to the poplar tree. But this time, they weren't just a handful of soldiers with axes. No, this time it was a military parade from hell. Hundreds of U.S. and South Korean soldiers marched in, armed to the teeth. 64 men in a convoy of vehicles surrounded the tree. 27 helicopters hovered overhead, circling like vultures. F-4 Phantom fighter jets screamed overhead in formation. B-52 bombers armed with nuclear payloads flew low, just to make a point. An aircraft carrier task force sat offshore, engines running. And in the middle of all of this chaos, a crew of engineers revved up chainsaws and started cutting. North Korean troops watched in silence, absolutely stunned. There was no way they could start a fight with bombers, fighters, helicopters, and hundreds of armed men all staring at them. So they did nothing. The Americans chopped the tree down in minutes, loaded the logs into trucks, and rolled out, leaving behind only a stump as wide as a dining table. The message was clear: you don't mess with us over a tree. The axe murder incident could have triggered World War III. Instead, it became one of the strangest displays of Cold War power. North Korea quietly backed off after that. The DMZ remained tense, but the tree was gone, and with it the excuse for further bloodshed. Today, the spot where the tree once stood is marked by a plaque. Tourists can visit it, shaking their heads in disbelief that humanity once teetered on the edge of nuclear war over landscaping. It's a bizarre reminder of just how fragile peace can be, and how sometimes the dumbest things can nearly destroy the world. This was the story of the tree that almost started Armageddon. Subscribe for more bizarre history.